So first, we're going to just address where we are. Today is about perspective. All right, so where are we? What's happening with tech disruption in education? By taking a brief look at the challenges that we're facing currently. And then I think it's important to zoom out, take a look at where we came from. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the history of technology disruption and the reaction to that. And then moving forward, we're going to take a look at 6 best practices for driving positive tech adoption. All right, so taking a bit of what we can learn from history and how can we utilize that and develop a plan moving forward. And Chris will be the first to tell you that those 6 best practices aren't gospel by any means, and it's not an exhaustive list, but we wanted to leave you today with some thoughts, some things to think about to help you prepare as you prepare your strategy moving forward. Now, if you had the opportunity to join us for a webinar last month, we discussed the technology adoption curve. All right, and for those of you who weren't able to join us, to put it simply, it's basically segments of people and their level of acceptance and or resistance to that technology and change. So we focused on this curve the majority of our last webinar and the archetypes it represents and how to empower and utilize each of those segments to drive adoption. So this time what we'd like to do is zoom out a little bit and talk about the impact of the technology itself. So what that first group, the innovators and early adopters, crave is that technology, the newest, latest, best, and what some of the rest shy away from. And like I said before, we'll share a couple best practices moving forward. But before we go past this curve entirely, Chris, I wanted you to get a chance to weigh in and what you've seen anecdotally in your work about this curve, and quickly how you think we can utilize the different groups to leverage interest and buy-in from the other segments.
Yeah, this curve is, I find it very fascinating because it's not something that you can really control that much, because that it follows really the nature of how people think and how they operate. And that some of your teachers are going to think differently than others. Some are going to be, some teachers are using technology in their everyday lives. So for them, using technology in the classroom is just a natural thing. It's organic for them. The teachers who are not using technology in their lives every day, they're the ones that have to really figure out, they're the ones that it's not native to them. They're having to figure out, how do I incorporate this? And it's really, it feels foreign to a lot of people if they're not just accustomed to using technology just to life hack. But what I've found is that, and you can't really force it. So what I try to do, my job takes me into the schools most days. And so I try to just nudge everybody along one step further from wherever they are. I try not to push everybody to the same point, but just to keep everybody moving forward. And because everybody moves at different rates, then that's where you get this adoption curve. And so what I found is that you've got this small group. They're the early adopters. They're the ones that are already using technology in their everyday lives. They're trying different things. They're gonna be trying things anyway. And sometimes they can be fickle. You may show everybody one product and they're going to jump in and start using it, and then the next week they've already moved on to something else. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were using this. So sometimes they can be fickle, but they're also great. I use these early adopter teachers as a test bed. They're kind of my guinea pigs. So if I want something, if I need to try something in the classroom, I know I can go to them and they won't bat an eye at it. They'll try it. They'll tell me what didn't work, and because they'll try anything. It's the early adopters it's the early majority and the late majority. I think that's where you get your inertia. And these are the people that, to me, they have to be convinced a little bit harder. The early majority, once they see a few people being successful, they'll jump in and they'll try it, as long as it feels safe for them and as long as they're not risking too much. And then the late majority, they really have to be talked into it. They have to see the other half, or the early majority, they have to see them doing it first. So once they see the early majority doing it, then that's where you get the late majority. They're like, okay, well, if it works for them, it'll work for me. And then once you get them on board, then they can be some of your loudest cheerleaders. So some of the people that wait the longest can be rock solid once you get them to buy into the program. And then they just need continued reassurance that they're doing it right. and that you're going to be there if something goes wrong. Because I think it all comes down to, and this is where the laggards come in, but at some point, and to some degree, everybody is a little bit scared of what might happen if they try to do something that feels a little bit foreign. So they just need to know that somebody's going to be there to help them up if something happens. And they might need to see a few other people being successful first. So you can't really rush the adoption curve. I think you just have to, try to move everybody a step forward.
Yeah, and I really like your proactive tip there. I think oftentimes that last group there, the laggards group, it can be assumed that they're simply resistant to change and or stubborn. And I think that that's not quite the case. I think prudence is a large percentage of that group. And like you said, once you can show them how they can be successful, I think it's important to know that they can really be, like you said, the loudest cheerleaders.
Yep, absolutely.
The point, though, is that whether we like it or not, right, we're here. So regardless of where you fall on that curve, the truth of the matter is that tech is advancing, ed tech is advancing, and the numbers are growing larger and larger. So we're there. So you can resist that change, obviously, and be afraid of it. But I think really it's exciting. I think this is, while it can be scary, overwhelming, yes, but this is a really exciting moment to be in education. It really does feel like we're at the forefront of a paradigm shift. So the sheer speed of this changing technology, it's easy to be caught flat-footed, especially in education, which is generally decision making can feel extremely slow. And so you always might feel like you're playing catch up. And so I think before we go any further, it's a good time to touch on some of the challenges that we face in the face of this rapidly changing and continuously pervasive technology. So let's take a look here at some of the challenges. And Chris, I wanted to ask you, which of these challenges do you think are the most immediate, which have the most traction, and which provide the biggest roadblocks to successful adoption?
Yeah, so some of these are kind of hard to separate out because it's all one movement, and it all moves together. But I'm sure it'll be different in different districts. But from what I've seen, tech integration is a skill that has to be learned, especially if you're not a digital native. If you're not someone who's using technology all the time, it really is almost like a skill to try to figure out how to leverage these tools in everyday teaching. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge we have right now, is just teachers figuring out how to do that. We tend to compartmentalize technology, especially those of us that aren't digital natives. We think that the technology, my phone can only be used for, Facebook and or texting. But it's capable of a whole lot more, for example. But, when computers or devices are brought into the classroom, it's hard not to compartmentalize what they're good for. And so some people have to stretch themselves to consider other uses for these devices. And students are the same way. If students are raised up using devices for Snapchat and Instagram, then they may not realize that there's a productive use for these devices because they've already been using them for social media before they got their device in the classroom. So they have to be reprogrammed. So in some ways, we all have to be reprogrammed on what these devices are used for, and that's kind of a skill in my view. And it can also lead to distractions. If everything's popping up on the screen and it's not what we're supposed to be engaged in, well then, that can be a challenge. And it may be that teachers just need to get better at coming up with more engaging ways to use technology productively in the classroom, so that the engaged use of the technology is the distraction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think learning to multitask on both ends of that spectrum, and really explore the different modalities to use that multitasking to your benefit in the classroom.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things that that kind of gives me hope is that there's already a push for project-based learning. There's a a push for high levels of collaboration in the classroom, student choice, student ownership. And I think that all of those things really lend themselves well to using technology in the classroom. So I think it's just a natural progression. If you're already trying to do project-based learning, collaborate, you're trying to give students choice and ownership of the curriculum, I think it's just natural then to look for ways that technology can do that.
You know, it's often when we discuss these challenges, the conversation often stalls here, I think, and people get sort of lost in the micromanaging of how to tackle each specific challenge as it arises. And I think at times like this, it's often good to shift our perspective a bit, zoom out, as I like to say, because the truth of the matter is that this really conceptually isn't a new phenomenon, right? Technology has been sort of pulling us along faster than we can get our hands around it throughout history. And you did a talk at Next discussing just that, you know, providing, I think, a great historical perspective. So to spend a little bit of time letting you sort of revisit that talk and discuss, you know, what it says here, the long history of tech disruption, resistance, and change.
Yeah, so what got me thinking about this topic was, you know, just the fact of human nature and why there is this disruption and why there's this resistance to change and to innovation. And, you know, I just started thinking about different points in our history of when we could have gone through this. You know, have we been through this before, or is this something completely new? And it turns out that there have been times in our history where we went through almost the exact same thing and we reacted in almost the exact same way. And so I think it's important to look at how we react to these same situations in the past, and it just gives us, I think, perspective. I think just looking at that doesn't necessarily give us specific answers, although I think that there's some takeaways. But I think just the perspective of knowing that this is going to be an evolution, it is going to be a time of change, and it's going to require education, I think just gives us all a little bit more patience and understanding in how this process is going to work, and maybe just a little bit more empathy as far as why different people are slower to come around than others. So one of the first examples that we experienced was electricity. So at the beginning of the 20th century, saw a phenomenal growth in the infrastructure, especially in rural towns. So in that case, homes were getting electricity in rural towns faster than we could figure out, you know, safety and figure out the social norms, and basically it just grew faster than we were able to manage it. So it forced people to learn new concepts, new terminology. You know, just the fact of plugging something in and a light bulb came on was a new concept for people. So, you know, there were blown fuses, there were house fires, neighbors were, you know, they stole electricity from other neighbors. And so it was just, you know, there was a time period there where it was just sort of chaotic. And of course, you know, we went through some of the same mentalities. That electricity, some people thought electricity was just a waste of money. You know, it was just for comfort and there was no practical reason. But when you look back at that time, you know, there's no way we could live today without electricity. We've gotten used to it. We assume a lot of things that, and we take for granted knowledge that they didn't have then. You know, if you look at this picture here, this kind of reminds me of that scene from the Griswold's Christmas Vacation where he's got all the different plugs plugged into the wall there. And we see that on the movie and we laugh at that because we know that that's not safe. But, you know, back in the early 20th century, that would have been the norm because they just didn't know better. And so they had to be educated, and there was a growing period there. And it took years to develop norms for using electricity safely. So, and another example of that, if you want to go to the next slide, another example was the automobile industry. Over the course of just 7 years, and this mostly happened in Detroit because cars came to Detroit first, but they went from 200,000 to 2.25 million cars in 7 years. So that was just an incredible growth in the automobile industry. And the same thing happened. People didn't know what to do. People didn't know how to manage the cars. In fact, the best thing that the only way that people could figure out how to manage it was to compare cars to what they already knew, their primary mode of transportation, which was horses. So all of the laws that were established at that time were based on the laws as they applied to horse and buggy. So they basically had to substitute what they knew about horse and buggies, substitute the current technology into that, which was the automobile. And so they applied what they knew to the new technology. So, even back then, they were stuck on the first level of SAMR,
Right.
just in terms of understanding the technology. They were substituting because they didn't really know how to take it any further. And so it's really no surprise that today teachers in our classroom are stuck. Some of them are stuck at that first level of SAMR with substitution because it's hard to conceive how to use technology past the point of what they're comfortable with, past the point of what they've already been doing. So, but yeah, with the automobile industry, it was just chaos for a few years, and they found that education was the key. It was educating people on those new concepts, new words, new terminology, and that's an awesome slide. The baby with the computer, because that's where we are now. And every generation has its own growing pains and has their own sort of age of growth. And we have the information age and the always connected age. And one of the things that I find fascinating is I've read some work by Ray Kurzweil, and if any of you have ever read his book on the singularity, and this is getting a little bit off track, but the point is that he calls there's this one event called the event horizon, and it's named after the point of a black hole where there's no return, right? So there's always these points in history that become event horizons. There was an event horizon where automobiles became ubiquitous and there was no going back. There was a point in history where electricity became the event horizon, and there's no going back. We have to have electricity. Well, I think about 2007, which is when the iPhone came out and really
Right.
smartphones blew up. It's kind of like our event horizon. If you think about that point on, from that point on, people, almost everybody now has a smartphone, and almost everybody is always connected everywhere they go. So that was our no turning back point. And so from there on out, everything has changed, and we're going to have the same or similar challenges and struggles coping with our new event horizon as they did, with the turn of the 20th century.
And I think each of us sort of recognizes that next event horizon on their own unique personal level. For me, real quickly, I to this day, and I work for a technology company. Every time I download a new app or there's a new website we're using company-wide, I got to do my due diligence and learn about it and figure it out. Whereas I have a 3-year-old niece who can take my phone, find the pictures, find the games, and do that all without thinking about it or swiping. So not only are we sort of tasked with educating young people, but also we have to navigate those waters where in many cases they're more digital native than we are, and in our role is to preparing them for a new world with new technologies. There's definitely a shift that has to happen on our side as well.
Yeah, I think nobody would argue that that students, young people, sort of get it faster. They understand it faster because they're not held back by preconceived notions. But the adults in the world are still the ones who have to make sure that these kids, get raised with the proper social norms and the rules in place and the perspective of how to use these tools properly. And that's where the challenge comes in, because you've got the digital non-natives having to train the digital natives on not how to use it as much, but the proper use of it. What are the proper social norms when you're just in a public place? So that's the challenge, is because we always say train the trainer. Well, it's almost impossible to train the trainer on this respect because we've never really been through this ourselves.
Right. But the truth is we're there, right? I think we
Right.
got to start with realism. And the fact is that the roller coaster started. We're on the ride. I mean, some of these stats, just like you said, how quickly cars became ubiquitous. 95% of Americans have cell phones. That's a staggering stat. 2016, a year ago, 54% of the U.S. students and teachers had school-issued devices. So that's already half of the entirety of U.S. students. and 90% of millennials believe tech creates more opportunities. So, you know, like we said, resistance is sort of futile, to quote that. We're there, and that realism starts with not only accepting the fact that we're in this push now, but you know, it's reevaluating some of the myths and mindsets. So I love the slide that Dylan had put together for us. Another colleague of ours who did a good share of work on this presentation today, Dylan Rogers, is having a baby, so we'll take a time out to send our congrats out to Dylan. But back on track. So we've got some myths, mindsets, and results. So, and that late adopter curve, you know, we see some of the general myths. Device is too distracting, which leads to the simple quick fix. We should take these away, and a result there, students don't learn digital responsibility. But not to put all of the onus on the late adopters. If we look at some of those early adopters who might consider that technology is considered inherently good, no problems to happen, can lead to the mindset that technology is adopted without careful planning, and then the tools don't enhance learning. Chris, you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, so you know, this is really interesting because you get to see both ends of the spectrum, and you know, neither one of these really paints the ideal picture. But it is interesting to think about sort of the adoption curve as it relates to districts themselves, and which ones, you know, are trying to throw everything out at once without preparing. You know, which ones are preparing as they roll out. I don't know. This kind of just really, it's interesting, but I mean, it's kind of speaks for itself, really.
Yeah. All right. So then we've done it. We've arrived. We've taken a look at some of the challenges. We've taken a deep breath to recognize that we've historically seen this happen before. And so, you know, being realistic is only a part of the equation, right? We need I think a plan moving forward. And so we put together 6 tips here that I would love to just kind of get your perspective of, Chris. Ways you've seen them work, and ways you think that we can use some of these tips to help develop the strategy that I think works best. Because I know in every case, it's going to be an individual institution decision-making process, what you think will work with your stakeholders.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. So best practice 1, we want to start simply changing the mindset. All right, and we've got a couple of images here. I think right here we're saying going from limit to regulate and from punishment to teachable moments. And you and I had discussed before, and you had used the analogy of the sink or swim model. So I'd love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, this kind of harkens back to the you know, to what we were talking about with the two different mindsets there. With the, you know, you've got the ones who are not the digital natives, the ones who really you know, don't prepare, versus the ones who you know, who just kind of who are really holding back. And sometimes what tends to happen with the ones who are kind of the laggards is they were not sure how to regulate and how to help students along. So whenever there's a problem comes up, their first instinct is to sort of pull the device away. If our students are distracted, then sometimes the answer is just to take it away from them. But you know, we know that students are not going to learn unless you allow them to make mistakes, unless you help them, and that's where sort of the sink or swim thing comes in. And so I think it's good to ask yourself: are you just limiting? Is your response to problems limiting, or are you trying to regulate? You know, are you trying to guide, or are you just you know, taking devices away when things happen? Are you, you know, does your acceptable use policy, does it just include punishments, or does it allow students to make choices and create teachable moments? One of the things that one of the discussions that we've had in our department is digital citizenship. And with digital citizenship, you know, should that be a separate thing that you talk about, separate from your character development programs, or should it be inclusive? Should you know, should digital citizenship really is just citizenship now, because we're always connected. So our lives online are just as active as our lives in person. So really, when we compartmentalize things with technology, it makes it, I think, not really feel natural and organic to the students. So when we're talking about discipline and behavior management, classroom management, I think that we need to consider technology as a tool, as a transparent tool that really shouldn't, as much as possible, shouldn't be the issue whenever problems come up. I try to really get my teachers to think about in terms of the student behavior and the engagement of the lesson when they're having problems keeping students on task. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that plays right into best practice 2 here is to be thoughtful about tech integration. It's not just a matter of throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. There are methods out there. There are models. It takes a little bit of exploration and some professional development in some cases. But I think that there's enough research and enough unique strategies being tested that we do have now some data as to what can work.
Yeah, and getting back to sort of our offline life and our online life, and really, is there a separation there? We have certain expectations for our students when they're not using technology, and we really want them to be creative. We want them to collaborate. We want them to communicate. We want them to have deep learning. So really, there should be no difference in those expectations when they're using devices. So I think another way to kind of look at SAMR is, do we have the same expectations with this lesson that uses technology as if we, would we have the same expectations, or would they accomplish the same thing without the technology? So, are they still being creative? Are they still communicating? Are they still collaborating? So really, same expectations whether they're using technology or not. And technology shouldn't be used to replace tasks, but really, it's a tool to transform our teaching, to do the things that we couldn't do last century. So, and I think that's the whole point of SAMR, is to, of course, to go beyond substitution, to be able to do things that we couldn't do before. But that fear of technology comes from being misinformed about the relevance of technology in our lives. But if it's not really transformational, then it's not relevant.
Right, and I think we'll touch on this in a slide coming up too. But you mentioned it there. The trap I see often is just simply getting stuck on that substitution step. Yeah. Simply thinking that bringing technology into the classroom automatically flips a switch, and now we're being transformational, and that's not the case. And many times it's simply just that, it's substitution, and then that can cause it to be just cumbersome.
Right, and that's a hard leap to make if you're not comfortable using technology just in general. It's a hard leap to make to think about, what are some ways I can transform my teaching with technology? I've got this incredible tool in my classroom. Every student has the world at their fingertips. Now, how can I use that to leverage learning and to leverage the how the students are able to conceptualize this? Because if a teacher is not able to think about that in their own terms, in their own life, then it's hard for them to bridge that gap it's kind of a leap for them. So I think that's why we have so many people on the substitution level, because it really, I wish we could draw the SAMR with a big gap between the substitution and augmentation, because I think that there is a big sort of a chasm there that happens, because once they make that leap and they realize that they can do things with technology that transforms their teaching, then it's easier. But there's a big hurdle there.
Yeah, and I think the other misconception often is that technology inherently should just streamline your processes and make things easier, and that's not always the case, especially early on. It's about putting in the work and doing the due diligence to learn and to shift your strategies. It's not simply about making things easier.
Right. It's not. Technology does make things more efficient. It can make it easier for the teacher. Especially as far as just collecting information, giving out assignments and collecting information. And an LMS like Schoology, we haven't even mentioned Schoology yet, but an LMS can certainly do that and certainly make things more efficient. But Schoology by itself will not transform your teaching. It basically just makes it more efficient.
And it goes further than that. And I think that best practice 3 is a good example of that. It's not simply just understanding the technology, but gathering the perspective of how technology is being used by the students, because it is a huge part of their lives. And that's not just sending text to one another. There's a whole variety of levels where students are engaged online. And it's not about becoming intimately familiar with each and every single program being used, but understanding how they're spending their time online.
Yeah, a lot of students are using Snapchat, Instagram. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she probably watches more YouTube than actual TV. They're using Twitch for gaming. One of the big things they're using these days is House Party, where a lot of kids will get, it's sort of like a group video chat thing on their phones. So they're using different apps to enhance their lives. And if we can understand what they're doing, it's possible we could use some things like Snapchat or Twitter, Facebook. We could use these things in the classroom if your school allows it to maybe redirect and show students how to use these for educational purposes.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to be able to at least conceptualize and understand, even a small portion of what kids are doing online, or what students are doing online. Like you said, I had not even heard of House Party. This is the first time that's ever entered my brain.
It's pretty popular. And we've always said, it's a good idea for teachers to get involved with students, lives outside of school, and go to the ball games and things like that. Well, I think the digital equivalent of that is know what apps your students are using when they're not in your class, and be able to speak that language. And even if you don't use those apps, at least understanding how your students are using technology outside of class, I think probably would be a great perspective inside the classroom.
You brought up Schoology, and an often underused feature that I see is simply enabling moderation. And I get asked a lot, what's the point of enabling moderation? Why would I want to have to gatekeep every comment that a student's making in a course? And I think that speaks to best practice number 4 here, which is the learner permit model. And I wanted to let you speak to that.
Yeah, so I think that too many times we probably just throw students into situations and they're not really understanding what to do. Students may have an understanding of social media. They may have used Instagram, or if they're younger, middle school, maybe they haven't used any kind of social media. And so we use things like Schoology, which has some social media aspects, but then some teachers are scared to turn on comments, scared to even use them with moderation turned on. And so but for me, it seems natural to use Schoology as sort of a training wheels approach to social media. Before students get on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, we could teach them some of these skills with Schoology by using the comments feature, by letting them make a few mistakes. Now it will take some time. Teachers have to spend a little bit extra time doing that. They're going to have to be a little bit brave because things are going to happen, and you just have to be ready for that. Especially if you're dealing with middle and high school students. But we talk about character development and teaching citizenship, and I think this is just part of it. And I think that we really do ourselves a favor by starting early and helping students navigate these things, early on. And I think that schools are a great place to help teach character development. I think this is another part of character development. And one of the things that I always recommend to parents, and I did this myself as a parent, is to start with read only in social media. So I think that's a great suggestion to give parents, is to let your own children start in social media by reading only without posting anything for at least 6 months, just to get a feel for things and see how it works before they put something out there that they can't take back.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip.
And the classroom use. We have some teachers that use Twitter in the classroom. They they use their students' post on their behalf with their supervision. And I just think all of those things are just a great sort of learner's permit model for social media.
Yeah, and I think it can't be overstated. really formulating a digital citizenship policy and getting everyone on board with that, I think is really key.
Yeah.
We touched about this a little bit earlier, and this is one of my favorite slides because it speaks a little bit towards that trap of getting stuck in the substitution model of Sammer, like we talked about earlier. I mean, you look at that, what looks like just such an antique classroom on the left of this slide, but in reality, a lot of times people will just throw a smartboard up front there and think that, okay, we've done it. We've moved into the EdTech revolution. And in reality, they really haven't changed any sort of methodology or made any sort of advancement whatsoever. So this is a chance for us to discuss sort of re-envisioning the classroom and the methods of education we use within.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to apply Sammer to the classroom environment as well, because like you said, some teachers think that they're integrating technology with just a Promethean board in the front end. Of course, they are integrating technology, but it's at probably a more shallow level than what you see on the right-hand side there, where the students are obviously, they're in groups, they're flexible seating, the teacher's roaming around. There's really no front of the classroom that you could see in this picture. They seem to be engaged. It's blended learning. They're writing, but they're also on computers. So I think that picture really does. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think that one on the right says a lot about what's going on in that classroom.
Yeah, the environment speaks to everything, and I really like the notion of shifting the role of teacher to facilitator. I think that's something that can put up some of the defenses of educators, but I really think that it really is the model we're working towards, and I think it's, especially with technology, using those tools is really an important distinction to make.
Yeah, well, the picture of the teacher up front with everybody facing the teacher is just kind of almost an unconscious picture of the teacher is in control and the students are complying.
Right.
And so when you look at the flexible seating arrangement, it's more of we're all a team, we're all learning together. It's it's more of a collaboration. And I think for some teachers, it's hard to let go of that idea of having the control of the classroom. So, but I don't think anybody would argue that it's not beneficial.
And then finally here, best practice number 6, enlist the help of all stakeholders. And that is the top-down example of effective tech integration. And I'll let you talk about your experiences with that.
Yeah, so in my experience, it seems, when everybody's on board, of course, it's going to be more, it's just going to work better and smoother. And I think that the more you can integrate technology into all stakeholders, like you said, the more successful it's going to be. You could integrate technology into PLC meetings, faculty meetings, admin meetings, grade level and department meetings, even parent conferences, board meetings. So I think that the more you can do that, the more you're going to gain inertia in the program, and your initiative is going to gain inertia. So, but sometimes, I see administration sometimes thinking, well, this tech integration thing is really just for the classroom. But the more they can model it, and the more they can realize that the classroom is more than just the room where the students are. You can have classrooms on many different levels. The administrators can model what they would like to see teachers doing in the classroom. They can model that in their faculty meetings. So, why not? It's the tone from the top. It's the top-down approach, and it's when I've seen it happen, it just makes things feel more natural.
You had mentioned it a few slides before about teachers allowing students to make mistakes. Giving them that wiggle room to grow and to learn. And I think that from an administration perspective as well, it's important to give your educators and the teachers in your buildings that same leeway, that same ability to experiment, to try new things, to try different modes of using technology, and to make some mistakes.
How awesome would it be to go into a faculty meeting and see your administrator trying to use Kahoot for the first time, or trying to use GoFormative or Pull Everywhere, or even using Schoology for a faculty meeting. And even if they fail, just seeing them try to do that, to be an example and to be a role model, I think would be outstanding.
Yeah, I got an email from my brother earlier who is they're a Schoology school, and this was the first time as a principal he was going through and doing teacher evaluations of rubric in real time, and the sheer excitement of just that simple use, walking around with an iPad and being able to just simply fill out your rubric as he went, really really thrilled him. So just a quick recap. The point we're making here is that you don't have to let tech drive your behavior. All right. So we discussed understanding how students use tech can help guide the strategies that you formulate with your team. The importance of changing mindsets and how that's a key to success. Thoughtful integration to ensure tech is used effectively. And like we had just said, giving students opportunities to practice positive tech use. That training wheels approach, I think, is something we don't talk about enough, and I think is now becoming a much more plausible scenario. And then aligning those learning environments to desired practices, moving past that substitution step, like we've mentioned. And as Chris was just talking about, enlisting all stakeholders to play a role, from the top down, from the bottom up, really across the spectrum. So we have some time here to have a little bit of a discussion and to answer any questions you might have. And Chris, I'm going to start right off from the beginning. We have a question from Gwen here. Gwen's asking for your opinion on what's an average amount of years or time to move through the adoption curve. So that might be through rollout in your school or simply working with the teachers at the school. But what advice would you give to that question?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that, if your adoption curve is strictly talking about adopting a one-to-one initiative, then it might be a different answer than if you're, let's say that you decide you're going to do, bring your own devices, and so every teacher has a voice to say whenever their class wants to move to one-to-one. Or if you're talking about just more of, say, when we rolled out Schoology, I could definitely see that same adoption curve happening with Schoology, because we said that there was a minimum amount of things that you had to do with Schoology, but as far as using all the bells and whistles, we said that basically use those on as you feel comfortable with them in sort of a blended learning mentality. And so, I think that it just depends on what you're rolling out and how fast you're rolling it out. But what I would say, just as far as advice on how to help people along through that curve, I would say set some minimum expectations of what you would like to see, and make those expectations sort of things where they can just get their toe in the water. So for example, what we did with Schoology to help sort of get people through that adoption curve was to say the minimum that we want our teachers to do with Schoology is to use the calendar. We want them using the calendar every week to put all of their lessons and post their documents and things like that. The rest of it you can use on your own time. And what we found was that when teachers got their toe in the water, once they got in there and they saw how it worked, and they just got logged in and they could do one little simple thing, they were able to move along that curve a little bit better, I think, than if we just kind of let people go at their own pace. So, setting little milestones, small expectations, I think no matter what you're doing is really the key to moving people through that curve. And I hope I answered that question. I may have talked my way out of actually remembering what the question was.
No, I think I led there, but along those same lines, we have a question here: is what would your recommendation be for how often a K through 12 school needs a needs assessment, a technological needs assessment?
Well, that's another great question. These are not easy questions, Mike.
No, I told you they were going to put you on the spot.
So I think that, I don't know that I could answer that, because I think every district has their own needs. But what I would recommend is putting together a team. We had an action team, an action committee that came together before we ever rolled out our first. We started out with carts in classrooms when we had a pilot year before we ever did one-to-one take them home. We had a pilot year where a few teachers had carts in their room, so we had specific rooms that were one-to-one, even though all the students weren't one-to-one. And we had a team of teachers come together and pilot that program and advise us on what to do. So I would say, really there isn't one answer to that question, but I would say have a team that involves as many different kinds of stakeholders as possible, so that so that you can make those decisions together. And then, you know, reevaluating what's going on. I mean, on some level, you should be doing that quite frequently, at least once a year. But, you know, I think, you know, having a 5-year plan, it depends on how quickly you want to roll things out. But I think start with having a committee made of as many different stakeholders as possible, and then just map out what your goals are, what you would like to see, how long you want it to take. And that's going to depend on finances. It's going to depend on, you know, how quickly you think you can move through that adoption curve. And just try to set, again, small milestones to get you from point A to point B.
Yeah, I think that's really it. It's setting it up in bite-sized chunks, and oftentimes I think going slower than you think you might want to. Really give the time for buy-in, and for and I think that a variety of stakeholders, like you've continued to mention, is really important. A lot of times we talk about train the trainer, and it simply focuses on faculty, and that really limits the amount of tools you actually have at your disposal.
Yeah, and you know, and if we're talking specifically about rolling out a one-to-one initiative, it's going to involve so many different stakeholders. Yeah. It's going to involve the city council. It's going to involve your school board. It's going to involve everybody on every level. So getting them involved in the beginning, you know, to make those decisions and set the goals and to set the timeline in a realistic way is the way to go.
This next question, and thanks for sending in questions. This is from Steve Wright. And I think we've touched on this, but they split a different hair here. He asks, would a tech adoption strategy for a faculty be best done in a differentiated or personal method, as opposed to all doing the same, having the same adoption goals?
Yeah, so again, what we did was we just set small expectations that really were for everyone. But then within each teacher, you know, each teacher has their own differentiated goals that they have with their supervisor. So as part of our evaluation system, every teacher has their own personal goals that they set with either the assistant principal or the principal, and they work on those together. So I think that the answer is both. You need differentiated goals that are individual, you know, for each teacher, but then you also just need, I think, baseline expectations that are going to move everybody together, because you still want consistency. You know, you don't want your parents seeing one teacher doing one thing and a different teacher doing a different thing. You know, for us, we didn't want some teachers posting their weekly plans on Schoology while some were posting them on their website, and you know, and it doesn't look like we're all on the same page. So we wanted to set minimum expectations that were you know, that would look good to the community, that would let our community know that we're on the same team, that we're on the same page, we have the same goals and the same vision, but yet everybody's going to have a different rate in which they grow. So, you know, long answer short, it's both. You need everybody needs to set their own goals, but you still need minimum expectations as well.
I think we have time for one more question here. And this is a great question. So, you know, we've definitely identified over the course of the webinar today that, you know, even the best handle we get on anything is never going to completely be able to foresee all of the challenges coming down the pike. I mean, as far as technology in general is concerned, even today, you know, FCC is rolling back some regulations on net neutrality, and that's, you know, it's been interesting to see this sort of passion that people have towards that issue, and that's exciting that there's that much buy-in to just because there's so much influence that just life online has to all of us now. So with the benefit of a little perspective, Chris, the last question we'll close with here, this comes from Robert Blumenthal. What's the one thing that you wish you knew before you began your one-to-one initiative?
That's a really good question. I'll have to go back a few years. What's the one thing that I wish I knew before we started our one-to-one initiative? I wish I had spent more time, and this is going to be really specific and odd, but I wish I had spent more time with math teachers before we started our one-to-one initiative, because by far the math classes are the hardest to integrate, because everything is so ingrained as far as just, you know, writing everything down by hand, you know, graphing, and I think still there's fewer tools for math teachers than there is for any other subject area. I think it's easier to integrate technology in the other subjects, but math is definitely the hardest to integrate. So I wish I had from the beginning tried to help the math teachers along more instead of just sort of helping everybody along equally, because it's quite frankly, it's just harder for math teachers to use those devices in class with the same level of effectiveness that they've been doing with graph paper and just with overhead projectors. So
right, a
from
little
the
more
very beginning,
specialized.
yeah, they're more specialized. They really are, and they require specialized tools. You know, you can't just throw a word processor and a some websites at them. They really have to teach specific skills that, and it's hard to find things that work better than just graph paper. So, with a blended learning program, you can say, well, you don't have to use technology as much as the other teachers, but really that's kind of a cop-out. So, from the beginning, I would say really trying to focus more on math. If hindsight is 2020, and